Welcome to the Hello AO podcast. My name is Craig Bradley, and today we have Adam Graber. Is that how I pronounce it?
Graber, yeah.
Graber. Wonderful to have you, Adam. So excited to learn more about you and to talk faith and tech. But first, if we could open up with prayer, that'd be fantastic. Would you like to pray for us?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Jesus, thanks for being with us and for us. Thanks that we get to participate with you in what you're doing. Thank you that you love us and that we get to listen for your spirit and follow you where it leads. Help us to do that a little bit more each day. Amen.
Amen. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Wonderful to meet you. We've never interacted or spoken before, and I don't even have a good idea who you are and what you do. So let me just open up by asking, before I even ask, what you're about, how did you get connected with the Faith Tech community on Slack, which is where this podcast has its home?
Yeah. I connected with Faith Tech in 2016. I think James was pretty early on in the journey with Faith Tech at that point. I think I saw a video of him speaking somewhere. It might have been, I don't even remember where, but he was sharing a little bit of his story. And I had already been thinking about faith and tech for a couple of years at that point. And so I was definitely keeping my finger on the pulse of anyone using those words in the same sentence. And so I think I just joined their newsletter in 2016, and then around the end of 2017 I got an email from that newsletter saying, hey, they were going to be in Chicago. And so I reached out and said, hey, I live in Chicago, would love to connect up with you guys. At that point, James was taking any connection that he could get. And I think otherwise he probably never would have connected with me. But we met across from Google, downtown Chicago, at a place called, I think it was called the City Mouse. I don't even think it's there anymore. At a restaurant there. And yeah, we had a delightful conversation for about an hour or two and got connected. And that was the start of a friendship, really. And from there have been connected with Faith Tech in various ways, connected with the Chicago community in Faith Tech, and have partnered with him developing content, finding writers who are writing and thinking about tech, to help that community, help the Faith Tech community sort of figure that out and sort that out. So yeah, it's been a long, good journey with them. Yeah.
Well, I've been muted because my dog's barking. If you'll give me 1 second, go ahead and just cover the space however you want.
Oh man. Well, talking to a screen without anybody in it is quite interesting.
We're back. Sorry, just a second there. My dog is a tiny little dog that's convinced I'm gonna die if it doesn't alert me when people deliver packages. So I'm well protected.
Yeah, fair.
That's wonderful. And just looking over your LinkedIn profile, which I've stalked you here while we've been talking, I see you have a background in Tyndale in some way, shape, or form is all I see. And then you've been consulting with Faith Tech ever since, or at least in some way, shape, or form since speaking to James, who's someone I've never had the chance or the privilege to connect with on any level, really, other than just some messages over Slack. But he seems like a real shady guy.
He is a shady guy, absolutely. Evasive, and you gotta catch these guys early in their
rise stardom. Yeah.
Otherwise, they become surrounded by an entourage of people, and it's a bureaucratic nightmare.
Yeah, paparazzi always following them. No, I get it.
Right.
Well, hey, just remember us little guys when you get to the top. That's all we ask.
Hey, I'm saying the same thing to him. Absolutely. Yeah, I worked at Tyndale in Bible publishing for about 15 years. I worked on the New Living Translation, and I worked on the Message Bible. And that was such a huge blessing and opportunity to sort of, spend 40 hours a week working with the Bible in some way, shape, or form. Yeah, it's a huge privilege, and it definitely shaped me as a person. But even throughout that time, I was got interested in the faith and tech world, started reading everything I could, finding people who were talking about it, all the way back in 2009, and yeah, just wanted to kind of follow that. And even I think going back and thinking about the influence that the printing press had on evangelization, the spread of scripture engagement, all of those questions were sort of relevant as sort of historical background to the work that I was already doing. But I think there were then a lot of patterns and similarities with how technology has continued to shape culture, shape the church, and shape our spiritual lives. And so, I've kind of followed that history up to the present day, to thinking about artificial intelligence, generative AI, Web3, all of these spaces that are being seen as opportunities for ministry, and figuring out what that looks like today.
Well, that's super helpful. And I want to go broad and get a sense of you and your background briefly, and then I want to try and find a few areas we can go deep in, so we don't stay, because there's just so many areas that we can just talk buzzwords without getting into something really. Not that that's just the danger in a podcast when you have a short amount of time. You kind of have to pick a hole and jump in it.
Yeah, for sure.
But broadly, what are you up to these days in your consulting, and also broadly speaking, do you have a specific Venn diagram where faith and tech intersect that you find yourself most occupied with?
Yeah, great question.
Thanks. I'm really good at this. I'm just I haven't.
No, it is. It's great. Yeah, so currently, I am consulting with different ministries, Christian ministries, Christian nonprofits, who are wanting to sort of upgrade their knowledge around tech. Maybe they realize that they need more institutional knowledge around technology that they don't have, and maybe don't know how to get. And maybe they have executives who have been at the ministry for a long time, but are trying to figure out what is AI, what is the metaverse, what are these things?
What is this Netscape dial-up I keep hearing about?
Yeah. What is cryptocurrency? What is blockchain? How can these even be used for ministry? So I've been working with a couple different ministries focused on global church planting, both in the U.S. and overseas, and again, helping Faith Tech as well figure out how do we spread the knowledge that we have, both from within the network to outside the network, but also how do we give handles and language to people within the Faith Tech community who are working in tech, but maybe don't have the language they need for their faith, and how their faith intersects. And so, going to your second question around the Venn diagram, I think my goal is to bring that Venn diagram closer and closer together, so there's more and more overlap. So, just recently I was talking with church planters thinking about church planting in the metaverse, and they're asking questions around, is it real? Is it just an escape? And really went back to the story of Bezalel in Exodus 31, and thinking about how he was building a metaverse by building the tabernacle. He was building a space where people could worship God. and thinking about, okay, if that's a space that's designed to bring worship and glory to God, how might the metaverse be another space that people are creating for the worship and glory of God? I've been thinking about artificial intelligence. The advances in generative AI are huge, and imagining, how will that shape how people are engaged with Scripture? If they're looking for information, but also kind of trying to understand big picture ideas in Scripture. How is generative AI going to sort of inform their thinking, inform that engagement? How is it going to shape not only the end user, but also the organizations that are building generative AI systems, potentially ministries or companies that are developing these systems, and how will that shape the church at large in how they present Scripture, how kind of at scale people are engaging with Scripture. Looking at where does blockchain and crypto connect with the mission that God has for the church, the desires he has for the world. Can crypto help us love God and love others better? That's very much the emerging tech space. With Faith Tech, I was doing have done a lot of reports on missional tech trends. So looking at emerging technologies and their impact on emerging Christian organizations. That includes information security, tech policy, everything I've already talked about, 3D printing, drones, natural language processing, digital learning platforms, social media. Yeah.
When we get to printing natural language processing tools, that's going to be a weird.
Yeah.
We're a few decades off of that, but maybe not. Who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe that's a decade away. At the pace of progress, who can say?
Yeah.
You can probably 3D print a microfab chip that can handle those on some small scale form. Like with RISC-V, sort of a chip that could do that in, I don't know, T-minus 15 years. Who knows?
Yeah.
So that's wonderful. That's a helpful background. One of the ways that we, as advisors for other firms and for other Christian organizations, so I myself advise a few other organizations, but mostly I just try and do my own thing. I don't give too much advice because I'm not much of a teacher. I really am not. I prefer to just kind of do it and show it. But I have worked in fringe tech for quite a while. I am advising and helping prototype with like Our Daily Bread, for example.
Okay.
Met with YouVersion a few weeks ago, kind of helping them think through some possible ways the web can go. And those are early. Well, the YouVersion's an early relationship that may or may not go anywhere. But Our Daily Bread I've been working with for quite a period of time, which is the only reason that I'm working with them is because I'm in Grand Rapids, Michigan. They're in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Yeah.
So. Where's home for you, by the way?
Yeah, so I am outside of Chicago. I live in Wheaton.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
not too far away. You don't know the Monsons, do you? Jim and John Monson at all? John Monson is I think he was at Trinity. He was a professor at a seminary around there. Chicago's a big area.
I mean, the name sounds vaguely familiar, but I don't know them personally.
All right, well. Jim and John Monson, amazing guys. Shout out if they're listening, and I know they're not, but if they were, But anyway, let's jump down a few holes just to see where the conversation leads us. One of the things I would postulate, I suppose, and I would love your thoughts on this, is that as if I put on my consultant hat, which I don't put on too often, but if I were to put it on, a lot of the time I advise companies by trying to reverse engineer a concrete vision of what the future looks like. And I say, hey, let's fast forward 5 years. Here's the tech trends if we take them to the logical extension, and then we're going to reverse engineer what some practical steps are today. Blockchain is a great example of that. People think Web3 is blockchain in a lot of ways. You can base
Yeah,
stuff on Ethereum, or it's Doge, or whatever. There's so many Hydera. There's so many solutions and architectures out there. I happen to think a lot of it, and this is I'm going to make declarative statements, but these are all questions. Please respond anytime. I happen to think a lot of it is kind of smoke and mirrors, in the sense that it has the promise of being practical, and in some ways it certainly can be. And the blockchain tech paradigm is a practical paradigm. And there's tremendous benefits, but the downside, and here's where the foundation gets shaky, is you can't have a cryptocurrency without a crypto military. You can't have a cryptocurrency without a crypto ag and military system to reinforce that currency, because it's nations that reinforce currencies with their armies, right? And I would say, this year probably FedNow is our first glimpse of it, but in the next year or two, if not this year, most national sovereign states are going to forbid cryptocurrencies from being able to be exchanged in place of a CBDC, central bank digital currency. It's a horrible trend, very dystopian, not a fan, but that is what's going to happen. And if that doesn't happen, there is going to be a lot more regulation around it. And that regulation is going to decide which cryptocurrencies are going to be winners and losers. XRP is a big favorite for a lot of reasons, because it's international forex. But at the end of the day, the whole market hinges upon regulation and what the militaries are going to enforce. And there's so many unknowns there. It's better to just kind of wait and see, is my take on it. I would love your thoughts.
Yeah. Super interesting. I definitely think, military might does have an influence. I don't think it's the only influence. You mentioned crypto ag. I assume that means crypto agriculture.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, a currency is if you go back to first principles, a currency is a reflection of the, basically the GDP of a sovereign nation.
Okay.
Of course, cryptocurrency is, the promise of cryptocurrency is a distributed, global, equal footing economy.
Yeah.
Until they outlaw it.
Yeah. And I think if a cryptocurrency gets tied to some kind of real product, that product could become part of the value driver there. So in the same, it's not going to have the force of power that military has, or that assets like agriculture might provide. But if you can create assets around which a cryptocurrency is based, it may sustain the value of that crypto in a longer term way.
Totally agree. And then until the regulation environment changes, right?
Yeah.
And that's changing as fast as law can change, which is still slow.
Yeah.
But it's all a house of cards if it comes down. You know what I mean? And it's possible that Bitcoin, for example, could become could survive all of those waves and become a really stable, I'm just picking an example, become a really stable investment that's secure. A lot of reasons to think that's not the case. It's a limited currency, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
But even if I had to pick something that I'm like, all right, I could see from a pragmatic standpoint, Doge being a practical application because of how low the gas fees are, because of how who's backing it and how they're backing it. But at the end of the day, the European Union is going to come together and they're going to say, hey, we're going to set these new standards for what crypto needs to make. The US markets will respond just like they do in every other area of tech, GDPR, things like that. And then that just rolls out.
Yeah. I mean, I've been fairly what's the word? I've been fairly hesitant around cryptocurrencies. I'm a little more bullish about blockchain in general. I think that said, I think blockchain is a solution in search of a problem. It's trying to figure out what it can provide that's of a practical benefit to people. And I think the adoption rate is a challenge because it's essentially a closed system, and it's attempting to, it's a closed economic system, and it's trying to, provide some kind of value within that closed economy in the same way that, any national economy has to provide value to the larger world outside of itself, or has to, be large enough to create internal value. And I think until blockchain is able to create that sort of value, it's going to be a question, but I think if there's a visionary entrepreneur who says, I want to create a company based on the blockchain, that's, generating revenue and creating, a product, I think that is a closed economic system that can create value beyond itself and sustain itself in some way, but the blockchain has to prove out as a sort of political entity that can justify itself and have value more than other corporate structures. And so, if a visionary entrepreneur can do that, then they may make their case and prove the value of blockchain. But until they do, people are just going to kind of wonder.
Yeah, and at that point, it's basically a closed economic system, as you said, or a secondary currency, right? Where it's like, hey, we're exchanging X many dollars for X many mega church points.
Yeah.
And how many mega church points you have means your prayers get answered in the order there is. I don't know, I'm making stuff up.
Yeah, right.
Terrible application. But you can see it. But I know some mega churches thought about it. And I'm not anti-big church. I am anti-prosperity gospel. I'm teasing. I'm being fun and tongue-in-cheek here. We're playing. But, hey, all that to say, I think you're absolutely right, though, that you can decouple an understanding of the blockchain paradigm from a cryptocurrency. A blockchain fundamentally is a distributed ledger, right? Where, one of the main value propositions there is that you can have a verifiable transaction that, yes, you could put it on a blockchain of some kind and think that's secure and verify, sort of stuff. But you could also just leave that on the traditional web and forego some of those so-called security benefits, but still have a distributed ledger, practical for a lot of people, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think the distributed ledger, yes, can be separated from crypto, but you still need an incentive system. And I think that's why almost cryptocurrency was created, was they needed to create an incentive system for people to participate in the blockchain and do the work. Without that, people were just like, well, there's no value to me to be on this blockchain. And so you have to create, ostensibly an incentive system.
I shouldn't put this hat on too often, so I'll try not to, but my conspiracy theorist hat would say that that Bitcoin was actually seeded by the FBI and the CIA, and they have a backdoor into it. And the reason and the evidence for that is that they're catching everyone they want to catch using Bitcoin. It's
interesting.
Yeah. There lots of news stories. If you look of so-and-so's, moved their wealth into Bitcoin, moved into these islands, and bam, the FBI raids their house a few months later and they got them. Where it's like, so
interesting.
Yeah. But if you follow the money, realistically, cryptocurrency needed to be popularized. Popularizing cryptocurrency seeds the way for a CBDC, and it's just a 20-year rollout of the CBDC, started by the FBI or the CIA or whoever. I don't know. But that's
I haven't heard that theory. So that's interesting.
That one, yeah. But I wouldn't be shocked. Anyway, enough with the tinfoil hat. That's enough of that. But getting back to the practical matters, there are some useful applications of a blockchain approach. For example, so my team, we've been working on a web-based game engine it's open source MIT, and it allows anyone to build and publish any sort of web-based experience. It's full 3D, think simulations, think Tony Stark kind of stuff.
Okay.
And the benefit of the blockchain in that sense is that we're not using any cryptocurrency, but we are using a distributed ledger, more like GitHub, right? So on GitHub, you have a code base and you can fork it, you can branch it, you can clone it, and then you can build on it and change it. Mm-hmm. And if you take kind of a GitHub mindset and then combine that a little bit with Google Docs has what's called a causal tree, that's how they manage all their changes of, this person edited this word, this person edited this word. Okay. If you combine a real-time causal tree with a distributed ledger, you can make simulations that can always merge conflict-free. So I can be working on a simulation of, an engine for a submarine. You could be working on a simulation for a healthcare practice, like a CPR or PALS algorithm. Or if we're Christians, I could be working on an ambient intelligence simulation that says, hey, I'm going to scaffold someone from a place of trauma into a place of mature Christianity by helping guide them through, trauma-informed care to, all right, you're out of a panic situation, you're in a safe situation, let's reach out to both a counselor, a Christian counselor, and a local church. And then after that, we're going to, hey, is it okay if we contact the local church and say a little bit about your situation? So there's all of those sorts of things where we can all author those simulations and do that on or off grid and then merge them later and let them all interoperate, that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. That sounds cool.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, we'll see. Could go nowhere.
I'm just thinking about sort of the virtual spaces and you already on some level have the cryptocurrencies emerging in things like Roblox and Minecraft and Fortnite, so and it's interesting because those are digital virtual spaces. So it's already kind of, we have this metaphor, this analogy for the real world that we're using where, okay, it's a virtual space. Now we need a virtual currency to sort of supplement it. And, but in that case, again, you've got a corporate entity that's driving and creating value within the network. And then, people are kind of buying into that value system, that closed economic system. And in that case with Epic Games and the others, they just don't have a blockchain kind of backing their structure at this point. And I think you could imagine another company doing that in the long run.
Yeah, you could, and they've just released the Fortnite editor in partnership. I was just at GDC at the game developers conference in San Francisco. I was in the Epic and Unreal booth a lot. That's where I got. They gave me this. I was behind closed doors and stuff like
cool.
that. There were a lot of Roblox people in that booth. I will tell you that.
Interesting, yeah.
So, you could, and that's possible because Epic hates the 30% cut they give to Apple and all those sorts of things. Where if you go on the blockchain of whatever chain you're going on, you're paying gas fees, but are those gas fees less than a 30% cut? Yeah, well, they are. They definitely are. And then it's a question of what chain do you do it and how do you do it, and if you want to do it, and is there going to be consumer adoption, yada yada yada. Yeah. But steering the conversation as practical as we can, this has been super interesting and fascinating. I would like to pivot us slightly and just ask your opinions when you're giving advice on virtual church in partnership with the emerging trends of AI. Where do you even begin there? What are your your decision razors that you're slicing away bad ideas with these concepts, right? Because there's so many ways to do that, in a way that seems like it could be good. So many ways to get that wrong.
Yeah. my friend Jeff Reed has pointed out, if you think about virtual church and you replace the word church with mission field, for example, the concerns that people have about virtual mission field, the concerns they have about virtual church just sort of disappear. So their questions around, is it a community, or can we do baptisms, or can we do communion? Can we really be the church? They sort of disappear. And, I hear a lot more openness, and I totally agree with what he's saying. I hear a lot more openness among ministries who are thinking, okay, how could we use this as a mission field? And they see it as an extension of their social media ministry. But it's very different. Social media still has a little bit of a broadcast era mentality where you can go viral and you can reach, thousands or millions of people with one tweet or whatever. And that's just not the case. That's, first of all, not the case with social media generally anymore, at least. It's certainly not the case almost entirely with a virtual space, where it's a much more intimate one-on-one encounter. But the opportunities for interacting with people in a virtual space, in a one-on-one way, and with people who are living in closed countries or living in countries that are resistant to the gospel, like, those opportunities are real. And I think that is a big carrot for ministries today, as they're thinking about it and what it looks like. So I think, but how do I think about it beyond that? Like, again, I do go back to this picture of Bezalel building the tabernacle according to the Lord's sort of guidance. And I think someone who's building spaces, for example, a guy I met has been working with, he created Oasis Church VR, and has been, as sort of a sermon series, has been each week creates a space, and has gone consistently through the Old Testament from Genesis. I think he was in Jeremiah like a month ago, and building experiences for people to walk through the world of the Old Testament. So, they're walking through the Red Sea, or they're walking into the tabernacle, or they're encountering, a simulated version of what Isaiah encounters when he, sees God high and lifted up on his throne. And those virtual experiences for people engage their minds and bodies in a way that a sermon attempts to, and in a way that even Jesus' own parables attempt to draw on the imagination, draw us in empathetically, imaginatively into this world that he's creating as a picture of the kingdom of God. And I think virtual spaces have the potential to do some of that as well, to draw us into imaginatively, empathetically relating to the world that the kingdom of God presents to us. And I think, so, those are some of the ways I think about it. Again, Bezalel creating a tabernacle, I think, can be a guiding light for builders who are wanting to create spaces for experiencing the gospel, experiencing the Bible, experiencing Jesus in the church through those virtual places. And I think, if it's true that the heavens declare the glory of God, then all creation is designed to bring God glory and to point us to him, and ultimately point us to worship him. And as a derivative, I think virtual spaces when they are designed to point to God's glory and, invite us to worship God, they're also oriented in the right direction. And so it's not escapism, but it can actually be, oriented towards worship and towards, shaping us into Christ-likeness.
I love that. And on our very first podcast episode, we had Brock Henderson.
Yeah.
And he, we talked a lot about just virtual experiences being a parallel for the parables Jesus told, and the way that they disarm the way story is a language and a medium for change.
Yeah.
And that's so true in VR. That's so true in AR. Any virtual experience you're having is a chance to put yourself in a story that can challenge you in a way that you wouldn't let someone typically challenge you if you don't have the humility to accept that.
Yeah, I did research with Faith Tech on video game ministries. I talked to Brock and learned a lot about that dragon cancer. And I quickly went from being somewhat of a skeptic around video game ministry to being a pretty big believer in it, for a lot of the reasons that you mentioned. The ways that it lowers kind of our defenses in engaging emotionally, empathetically in these stories, to walk us through and to even process our own experiences. You mentioned trauma. Processing trauma is very much at the center of that dragon cancer, and so I think that can very much be
wonderfully terrible experience. If anyone hasn't experienced it, I recommend you go check it out. It's the story of a Christian family struggling with the cancer of I think it's their baby and their 2-year-old. I've been through it. It's been a few years since I've gone through that experience, but if you need to be convinced of the power of video games telling stories, look no further than that dragon cancer.
Yeah, and I think we often think of the big games like Fortnite, and Fortnite doesn't really have a narrative to it. There's a world and a setting, and we might create our own imagined stories out of that, but it's not taking you through a narrative. And I'm much more excited about the narrative video games than I am just about a shoot 'em up like Fortnite.
Yeah, no, totally agree. I haven't played much Fortnite, but I do see the value in what you're describing, and I think a major component of the Christian faith that almost no Christian, that the Christian global community has not begun to grapple with, is how spatial the Bible is and how three-dimensional the Bible is. And I think the world's greatest Bible teachers are going to be the ones that see the spatial dimension of the Bible. And so many of the stories, the parables, even the events of the Bible take place centered on a geography, centered on the parable of a biological thing like an almond tree, or even making a point sitting up on a mountain, right? Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. There's just the Garden of Eden is called a mountain in Ezekiel. There's so many theological elements that are visually presented in the Bible. And when we take a 3D concept, flatten it into 2D, it then takes so many calories to unflatten that concept, right? And so Christians attempting to unflatten and say, hey, this is what I think this looks like. Here's a way I see this unfolding. It reduces the barrier. And not only does it disarm, but it, things like, dare I say, Leviticus, right? That's a beast to read, but it's pretty easy to see, For the basins. And so one thing I'm trying to think through, and this is a current experiment of mine that I have in no way even begun to scratch the surface of, is I'm trying to think through the lens of what is the Bible from a 3D perspective. And I'm trying to prototype that in my own nonprofit, AO Lab. And that's one of those things where I'm very open and interested to see in the next couple of weeks, and this isn't a promotion, but I will say in the next couple of weeks, I'll have a domain up called ao.bot. where I'll have that 3D game engine I've been talking about available on the web for people to use for prototyping. Small developer community. I'm not looking to publicize this. This is just like, hey, for people who want to make prototypes to experiment with this stuff, that's going to be a thing. And for me, it's an attempt to help us start to think through this. And there's simplistic and there's complex ways there. On the simplistic side, just going through the land and the geography and just letting people explore the land and go, hey, you're standing in Hebron. You want to know the story of Hebron? There's a biblical story there, right? And letting people kind of explore the land as they would anything else. It takes it suddenly you're not lost in this myriad of information. You're just asking yourself, well, what am I near and what am I interested in?
Yeah.
The other thing is, another example would be chiasms. I think, and this is just me. I have never heard anyone else share this perspective on chiasms, which means I'm probably wrong.
Is this another tinfoil hat moment?
This is a tinfoil hat moment. No,
Okay.
this is a thought experiment moment. I have so many tinfoil hat moments, but I'll save those for later. I'm only allowed one an episode.
Yeah, that's fair. That's healthy.
Yeah, thank you. My wife gets tired of it. She tells me she loves me so much, and she's like, you can tell me one a month, and I'm like, okay. So a chiasm, I think, is a mountain. People call it a chiasm. So just for those who don't know, a chiasm, it comes from I think it's the Greek of an X, is what that concept is, where in so many cases in the biblical narrative, you're going to see all over the Old and the New Testament, someone say something and then repeat that same thing later, and that gives you the clue that you're at two sides of a chiasm, where the most central idea is in the middle of those 2 points. And golly, if I can't come up with a good example off the top of my head, I'm sure there's maybe you have one. Let me just Google chiasms in the Bible. Great examples there.
Well, while you're doing that, I will say my friend Thomas Middlebrook is a Old Testament professor at Simpson University out on the West Coast, and he would be glad to hear you talking about the nature of place and space in the Bible. I think he did his PhD on place and the notions of place in the Bible, and I think it very much is very relevant to how we think about Scripture. And I think this is something that I haven't looked into deeply, but I just saw a TikTok yesterday. I'm only allowed to mention TikTok once in an episode, but it was a TikTok. So take it for what it's worth here. But the guy was claiming that the tabernacle is designed and has all this gold filigree, all these kind of delicate carvings. You mentioned the almond tree, but these differing sort of designs within the tabernacle that are in some ways it meant to evoke the Garden of Eden, and to sort of recreate the Garden of Eden as this place where God lives, and this place where we encounter God. And I've not heard that before. That may or may not be totally accurate, but this idea that we are using space and place, and using the symbols of the time, gold kind of representing God's holiness or his divinity, all of these things. And today we have different symbols that convey that meaning. But we kind of use that symbolic language of our day in order to reflect the world as God intended it, and that is taking us towards the purpose that he has for it as well. So I think very much those spaces. And then just one caveat, and then we'll get back to chiasms.
Yeah.
Is I think what gets lost in Scripture when you try and three-dimensionalize everything would be something like Paul's letters. And so, even as you're transferring, to a different medium, Paul's letters are fairly abstract. They're logical and they're argumentative, and he definitely has tons of metaphors and imagery, and some of that can be translated, but the sequence of thought, the sequence of argumentation that Paul is kind of creating there, that certainly kind of gets lost. And I think, my friend doing Oasis Church, creating the Old Testament is super easy, but once he gets past the Gospels and Acts, I think he's going to find it a lot more challenging to figure out how to depict, Romans or Galatians in a virtual reality setting. And so, it's important for us to recognize that each medium has the things that it favors and the things that it downgrades. And in the process, and that's even true, when we go into a worship service or when we read the Bible, each of those mediums highlights certain features and downgrades other aspects that maybe, and makes them less visible, and draws our attention away from those things. And so we need sort of this holistic experience to really convey the holistic reality of the kingdom of God.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think as a secondary thought there, that, one of my additional concerns in running the experiments that I'm running is, what is the line that we cross where we dress the Bible up too much?
Okay.
What the scriptures need to be. You're never going to experience the power and transformation of God until you spend lots of time meditating, praying, thinking. It's not going to be a fancy PowerPoint presentation, 3D or otherwise, that convinces you, right?
Yeah.
And yet, at the same time, there are so many 3D objects in the Bible, and so many 3D scenes that are painted, that there's a benefit to be had there as well. And to your point, yes, Paul's letters are designed letters to be read conversationally, which then changes what sorts of experiences may or may not add to that, and 3D is the right approach. But
let's go back to chiasms. I could keep going on this.
Well, we can, and this is why it's a 10-hour podcast. I hope you brought some snacks. I only have a few. I probably have 10 more minutes, and we should wrap up. But I don't want to. I love the conversation. I want to keep going. But going back to chiasms, I'll share my screen briefly. Actually, I am by no means an expert on chiasms. It's just not my forte. I wish it was. But a wonderful resource I've found just in Googling, and I'll leave anyone to judge whether it's a good resource, is the Chiasm Exchange. And I'm going to spell that out for people who don't know. It's a weird spelling. ChiasmusXChange.com.
That is weird.
It's the craziest spelling. Chiasm does not sound like it spells at all. Thank you, whoever. And they have so many chiasms in this exchange that honestly, it's harder to find things that aren't than are. But one of the things they put here on this website at the bottom in this guide is they say, hey, chiasms are it's not a secret Bible code. It is intended to communicate thoughts, but this isn't going to be like a secret code that changes the Bible. That's not what it is. Anyway, a simple example they give is an ABCCBA pattern of a chiasm where God says in Genesis 9:6, whoever sheds A, the blood, B, of man, C, by man, C, shall his blood, B, be shed, A. So it goes, it climbs up and down that concept, right? Or a smaller version that we would say in our own language I lost that. I don't even know what it would be. I had a great example. It's gone. We're moving on. But I would say a chiasm is a mountain structure where the peak of the idea is the idea. It peaks in the middle of the chiasm.
I like that.
Well, and the reason that it makes sense is the Garden of Eden is a mountain. Mountains were always it's a way of the author drawing a mountain. And so I'm imagining, what does a 3D Bible look like where you could lift that chiasm off the page and see that mountain? And
I would also think like it's a journey there and back, right? So I'm Right. I'm traveling maybe up to the top of the mountain, but then I'm taking the same route back down, and I'm going to see the same things along the way, but I'm also going to see them from a slightly different perspective because I'm coming from the other direction.
Totally.
And so, they're the same mile markers, the same, visual cues, and there's just that tweak. And so when I get to the top of the mountain, I have one experience, and when I get back, I am back in the same place, but I'm not the same person as a result. Yeah.
No, exactly. And there's Jim Monson is a language expert, he's a biblical scholar in Israel, and he's a wonderful guy. And he spent like the last 20 something years just studying Isaiah 53, and he has I have to, my life's mission, and one of them is like he's getting up there in age, so we have to get the chiasm map from him before he passes on. But
cool.
he's got layers of chiasms within chiasms just in Isaiah 53 that he's found, that he's spent years studying.
It's a whole mountain range.
It is, and that's where it's like I think there is a mountain range in the Bible that we've not even begun to tap into. And the language of symbolism is a whole other aspect of the Bible that we don't think about with our Western minds. And that's a whole other thing to get into. And all of these are layers of meaning that prove the story of the Bible in a way that's deeper. The story isn't fundamentally changing, but it is being so much bigger, so much more enriching than we would have suspected. And just shows God's handiwork in it.
Mm-hmm. I'm reminded of That Hideous Strength, C.S. Lewis's third in the Ransom trilogy. And
one of my friends named his son Ransom, by the way, because of that.
Oh, trilogy. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's amazing. But that book is itself a chiasm. The sequence of the chapters.
Oh, wow.
It goes inward and then it comes back out. And
blowing my mind. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Wow.
Go back and read it. I marked each of on the page edges. I marked the chiasm so I could, visually see. Okay, first and last chapter are associated. The second and 14th chapter or whatever are associated, and it moves all the way in and then all the way back out.
That's incredible. And one last thing on the chiasms, and we should work towards closing this up here, is to say that one reason I think the value of them, because it seems like an obscure, weird thing, is that we have to keep in mind that in the ancient days, writing a document, writing a scroll, writing anything down was a large task. And obviously we take for granted how easy it is to type something up or just pen and paper, right? But those were not the resources they had back then. And so due to the length of the task of writing anything, there was a lot of room to put thought into carefully crafting the narrative when you only have one or two shots to create something that before your budget runs out, right? It's like so before the harvest season is upon us, and then we're just too busy, right? So I'm making stuff up, but you get the idea. And so the ancients spent a lot more time crafting the literary resource due to how scarce and how valuable written words were.
Well, and I find it interesting, if you go into HTML is full of chiastic structure, right?
Totally.
It's a nested structure, right?
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that at the center of that nested structure is the content itself. And then you have all these bracketed things in order to the metadata that's kind of describing each segment. And so even in our contemporary day, you've got the modern day scribes, and I would say the coders today are the scribes, are what the scribes were 3,000 years ago. They were translating into a programming language, and then they were extracting from that programming language. Very much so. And as a writer myself and as an editor, when I'm working with people who are writing, they often start off really well, and they get to the end and they're like, I don't know how to finish this. And I'll often, even in my own writing, think, okay, how can I take us back to the beginning of this piece.
Mhm.
And I'll often, tell people, all right, just go back to your introduction and how can you tie it back to create, and I think as a reader, that's so satisfying. You come back to where you started, but you're not the same person, and you've had this kind of journey that you've gone on, and now you're coming back to that same place where you started, but you see everything a little bit differently. And there's a denouement, there's just a satisfaction that comes with that sort of chiastic journey. I think in some ways it's embedded in our DNA, I guess.
I can hear the Lord of the Rings music in the background. They're back in
Exactly.
the Shire,
Yeah.
ending back in the Shire, but
Yeah.
different,
Absolutely.
Well, hey, Adam, this has been a treat. I will treat our audience to a few random chiasms before we go off the top of my head that I've seen in the scriptures in some bigger systems. But before we do that, how can people get a hold of you if they wish to? If you wish them to, let me clarify that.
I wish them to.
Okay.
AdamGraber.com. I'm on Twitter at Adam Graber. Those are both really easy ways. And on my website, there's a connect button, and you can get all my info to email me or reach out on Twitter. Those are the best ways to connect with me. Yeah, thanks.
There he is in all his glory. Hey, awesome. 10 years of writing, speaking, podcast, faith tech. I'm reading off the website for those not watching.
Yeah. And if you're listening, I have a podcast too, Device and Virtue. We argue the rights and wrongs of technology and faith in everyday life. And we are doing it pretty regularly. We talked about ChatGPT. We've interviewed a lot of people like you're doing. And so, yeah, all ways that you can engage.
Fantastic. And if anyone wants to get a hold of me, the best way to do that is just don't. I'm not available. So I'm just
evasive, elusive, just
like
James Kelly.
You can email me at craig@helloao.org is my email. I've got other ways you can get a hold of me as well, but that's a way. CRAIG@hello, HELLOAO.org. The name of my nonprofit is AO Lab, and it stands for Alpha and Omega, making tools for to help people live and love out the gospel on behalf of the Alpha of Omega, the Alpha and Omega, at least aspirationally, So we'll see we'll see. All right, final chiasms, and then we can go. If you have any that you want to offer in, I was just thinking about this, but I think the best chiasms, the most enriching, are the ones with Jesus at the center. And so an example of that, I would say, is the Garden of Eden. It starts with God's walking in the garden. I think there's a strong case to be made that's actually Jesus himself walking in the garden with Adam and Eve. Fast forward to the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus is betrayed. Then, of course, you have Jesus on the cross, followed by Jesus being raised in the garden tomb. And then ending in the Revelation, the new creation coming down as a garden. The new garden is now transformed into a city that is a garden with trees and water flowing out of it, life into all the land in the same way that the Garden of Eden had done. So you have two gardens on either side of the cross there: Eden, Gethsemane, the garden tomb, the new city.
Cool.
Another interesting one I would throw out there is the Johns and the Marys. Jesus' ministry begins with John the Baptist being born, and then ushering him in, baptizing him, and then proclaiming the way. And Jesus ends with John, the Gospel of John, writing Revelation as a way to sign off, saying, "Hey, this is the end." So it begins and ends with a John declaring he's coming and a John declaring he came.
Interesting.
And then the Marys. He is born on the cross. It's easiest to see on the cross, but on the cross, he is watched by Mary, his mother, as he dies and breathes his last, and he is raised to the first person he reveals himself, Mary Magdalene, the woman who's been redeemed. And so it's a picture of he is on. You can see both the Johns and Marys on either side pointing to Jesus being a fulfillment of Adam, a fulfillment of of humanity. And I actually don't even know what the significance of that chiasm is. I just know it's there. There's got to be something else to it. I don't know the meaning of the names. There's something else. I don't know. So hit me up.
Yeah, interesting.
And there's so many others. We could spend days. But it does illustrate the beautiful patterns and the arcing mountains of concepts all throughout the Bible. Well, on that note, been a pleasure. Adam, thank you for the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been great.
Yeah, and if you'd like to bash around some faith concepts and some more in the future, I wouldn't mind having you back if you're open to being pestered.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
All right. Well, cheers. God bless, and have a good whatever it is that's happening in your life.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.